G'day, Groovers. This is an impromptu and fairly short episode of the Smooth Criminal Podcast special series, The Wreck of the Ruby Princess. Thank you to the lovely Cherie who sent me a link to an article last night. I was babysitting my cat Biscuit, who's had a bit of a health issue over the last few days, and I was pretty pooped last night, and she was starting to look a bit better than she has in ages. So I decided not to go live last night. I chose to spend some time with her instead. But yeah, poor little Scrap. But anyway, she's on the mend. She's still not her bouncy self just yet, but she's getting there. G'day to everyone in Facebook land. Hi, Amanda. Yeah, tuberculosis. That's why we're having this quick little episode. So, hi, Ruth. How you doing? Now, my camera isn't connected up, and it's Sunday, and I've been studying. So even if it was, I probably wouldn't turn it on. But I just wanted to cover the latest saga with the Ruby Princess. This is getting juicier by the second, but certainly wouldn't have predicted the story that broke last night, but I am referring to the ABC News website with an updated article from 55 minutes ago, I think. Hang on, let me just refresh that to check. No, sorry, this is still last night, but they did update it late last night. So if you haven't heard the latest news, the Ruby Princess passengers that were on the fated voyage, the one we refer to as the Wreck of the Ruby Princess, have been contacted because a crew member has now been diagnosed with tuberculosis. Yeah, so as if they're not already stressed out enough with all the COVID-19 stuff that's been happening, including most recently somebody in Australia in Queensland testing positive to COVID-19 and being directly linked to the ship, which has also got everyone talking about, can this virus lay dormant for a lot longer than first thought. I haven't found another article yet about the Queensland latest, hang on, I'm just going to type it in, latest COVID-19 Ruby Princess to see if there's an update on that, because they were trying to ascertain whether or not, I think the latest article is still saying that they haven't been able to confirm it yet, but they're certainly investigating it. And she was a passenger on the Ruby Princess. So, yeah, it doesn't look like it's still the same article saying they're thinking that the woman in Queensland did actually carry a dormant coronavirus for 10 weeks before falling ill. I've just found an SBS article just saying that. And yeah, they do think it was dormant. That kind of makes it a bit creepy, right? I mean, coronavirus is already creepy enough, but if it can lay dormant for that long, maybe all the people that are still complaining about restrictions being lifted could just chill the fuck out for a little while longer. Just going to close the screen door because Biscuit has come back in from being on the deck. And it's starting to get chilly here on the last day of autumn, first day of winter tomorrow. Thank you, Ruth. It's been stressful. I would have been a terrible mother because I was so emotional with Biscuit, even just leaving her at the vet. And I drove away just so upset that I had to leave her there. And I was thinking about how parents must be feeling when they have to leave their kids in hospital. And then I was thinking about all the coronavirus or the COVID-19 patients that are in hospitals on their own, not just children, but adults as well. But she's on meds and potentially for the rest of her life, but she's so close to being back to her normal self today. Still a little bit wonky, but we're getting there. So thank you, Ruth. So yes, onto the tuberculosis story, and I've started writing a little script for the summary of the episode of Four Corners that showed in Australia this week about the carnival cruises and cruise ships generally, and then also it went into a lot of detail about the cruise prior to the wreck of the Ruby Princess cruise, the one that we're following, the one that disembarked on the 19th of March. There's a lot of info about the previous cruise because there was a lot of awareness about COVID-19 being on the ship. That came out in the Four Corners episode. So that was a bit scandalous because now it's not just about letting them disembark on the 19th of March. It's about letting them embark on the start of the cruise as well, when the prior cruise had some COVID-19 swabs. So that's all a bit scandalous. But the latest one, the ABC News website is what I'm using as my source of informations. And this won't be a really long episode, by the way. I just wanted to, stay up to date because this is the latest development. But all the people that were on the wreck of the Ruby Princess cruise have been issued with another health warning because a crew member has been diagnosed with tuberculosis this week. It was a male crew member who's... Oh, no, please don't. Sorry, Google on my phone was just recording everything I was saying and was trying to find an article or something. So it's a male crew member. According to New South Wales Health, he's being treated in Sydney's Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis weeks after the disembarkation on March the 19th. So I'm not 100% sure of the full details, like whether he was showing some symptoms and was taken to the hospital. There were passengers that we know that were taken from the ship to the Prince Alfred, and I don't know whether this crew member is one of those people. But the diagnosis of tuberculosis was weeks after March the 19th. The Assistant Director of Communicable Diseases, Christine Selvey, sent out a letter on Saturday telling passengers that they were at a very low risk of infection. Now, this is, if you're just joining me right now, this is regarding a crew member who's tested positive this week for tuberculosis. In the letter from Christine Selvey, she says, there is no reason to believe you're at increased risk of contracting tuberculosis from being on the cruise ship. Tuberculosis is spread from a person with active disease after close and prolonged contact with that person rather than casual exposure. And then an expert panel on tuberculosis met on Friday after the man was diagnosed a few days prior to that. So let's just say, maybe Wednesday this week. Greg Fox, the New South Wales Director of Tuberculosis Services at Sydney Local Health, said, at this time, we do not think passengers need to be concerned about their risk of infection. He also said health authorities were contacting people who had prolonged contact with the crew member and they were screening them for the disease. So prolonged contact, I guess, without going to sexy town, but, people, I suppose, who possibly even shared a cabin if the crew share cabins, or people that were working closely with him, or if he spent extended periods of time with any of the passengers on the ship. Professor Fox also said symptoms include prolonged cough, fever or weight loss over a period of weeks or months. It's quite different to COVID, which is a much more acute respiratory illness, he said. It's possible the patient was contagious maybe 1 month before they developed symptoms. It's possible that they were infectious. Oh, there's a typo. It is possible that they were infectious during the time they were on the cruise. And presumably, I guess, if this dude was working on the prior cruise and maybe even the cruise prior to that one. A little bit about tuberculosis. According to the World Health Organization, it killed about 1.5 million people worldwide in 2018 and is still in one of the top 10 causes of death, which I find fascinating. I mean, I'm aware of TB. I just didn't realise that it was that hardcore. And if anyone in chat says it's not as bad as the flu, I'm going to mute you. The disease most often affects the lungs and is spread when infected people cough, sneeze, or spit. New South Wales Health said the people who may be at risk of infection include some hospital staff, roommates, close friends, and workmates. There you go. I foreshadowed that. I haven't read this article yet. I think New South Wales could employ me. I'm ahead of my game. Of course, with the Ruby Princess currently, and hopefully no more, but 22 deaths directly acknowledged to be linked to the Ruby Princess. Of course, there may have been some that the connection wasn't made, so they're still saying at least 22 deaths. And of course, we've also still got the criminal investigation underway and the Special Commission of Inquiry. I'll just do a quick check before I sign off to see if there's any other news relating to the inquiry. Then there's a bit of a chit-chat about how many people are being tested in New South Wales and so on. And then I'm going to screen share the letter from Dr. Christine Selvey from New South Wales Health. So we can all have a little look at that. Oh, Amir's back. G'day, Amir. Sensationalist news. Tuberculosis on rubies a red herring. Do you think so? Why is it sensationalist news if it's factual? There are 1,300 cases of TB a year in Australia. This is just sensationalist journalism. Are we going to start reporting people that get cancer from those that were on the Ruby Princess? Well, it's just a topical story. And if a crew member's tested positive and a letter's gone out to passengers, it's kind of relevant. I don't know if it's sensationalist journalism. It just, to me, it sounds like the sources I'm looking at are pretty credible. I'm certainly not sensationalizing it. I just think it's an interesting little subplot to what we're following. But, you know, if you think it's sensationalist, Amir, that's your choice. I just think it's just another twist in this story. So I'm just going to screen share get rid of my bit and try and expand this as much as I can. This is just a copy of the letter that's been sent to all the passengers on the cruise that we're following, the one that disembarked on the 19th of March, left Sydney on the 8th of March. And this just went out to all of the passengers just to let them know that a crew member has been diagnosed with tuberculosis this week. And again, I'm confused by you thinking it's sensationalist, Amir, considering this letter is pretty much telling them to not panic or freak out, and there's no reason to believe you're at an increased risk of contracting TB from being on the cruise ship. And it goes on to say you do not need to take any action as a result of this information. You do not need to be screened at this time. However, we want to let you know of the situation to allay any concerns. I mean, they're under the microscope at the moment, not just nationally, but internationally. And this to me just seems like they're making sure their butts are covered and that they're being seen to be doing the right thing. But if you can explain to me why you think this is sensationalistic, let me know. It's not relevant to go, well, what's your point? What is your point? I mean, it's a new diagnosis and a letter's gone out to the passengers. It doesn't have to be. Why does it have to be relevant to COVID? Are you talking about my podcast, or are you talking about them sending out the letter? I don't get your point, mate. Hey, Angela. TB is highly contagious and has similar symptoms. It's topical and very interesting. It is topical. I thought I was thinking of topical application of medicines just then, but yeah, it is. I agree. It does say in the letter, or at least in the article that I was just reading, we'll just keep going with the letter. Tuberculosis is spread from a person with active disease after close and prolonged contact with that person rather than casual exposure. So you do have to have prolonged contact, and I think that's why they're certainly checking in on any roommates that this crew member had on the ship, other staff that he worked with closely, any passengers, I guess, that he spent a lot of time with. But it sounded like further up in the article when they were going through who's been contacted, they sounded like they were all pretty much other crew members. This crew member is currently a patient being treated in Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, Sydney, and was diagnosed many weeks after you were on the cruise. A panel of tuberculosis experts met yesterday after the patient was diagnosed with tuberculosis. The people who may be at risk of infection include some hospital staff, roommates, close friends, and workmates. Passengers on the ship are at very low risk of infection. I mean, this to me is purely New South Wales Health being, trying to do the right thing, because they're clearly in the spotlight with the whole Ruby Princess saga. And if they didn't put this letter out to passengers and someone did end up getting tuberculosis, another passenger, can you imagine the lawsuits and the shitstorms that will follow? Sydney Local Health District is caring for the patient and following up those people at increased risk of infection so they can be checked for infection and receive preventive treatment if necessary. And then there's a link to a tuberculosis fact sheet. There's also a number within Australia they can call and an international number. So there you go. That's the latest story and chapter of this ongoing saga. You grew up in Africa, Ruth, with tuberculosis. Yeah, I've always sort of naively, I guess, connected tuberculosis to Africa, probably because the most information I've read in the past that's come out about it has been African figures and statistics. But yeah, it does sound like a nasty thing to catch. Journalism is by definition factual. That's not my problem. My problem, it's nothing to do with anything. Dude, you are confusing me greatly, because this is a podcast about the Ruby Princess, where 22 people have died, over 700 people have tested positive, and there's a huge inquiry underway involving state and federal governments, departments within both the state and federal governments, Border Force, the Department of Agriculture, etc. There's a class action suing Carnival Cruises, and now this is the latest update. A story's come out that now there's a crew member who's tested positive for tuberculosis, and I think New South Wales Health sent out that letter because they are already completely under the spotlight, and they don't want a passenger turning around after if they tested positive with tuberculosis and a whole new bloody scandal occurs. So I think it's actually got a lot to do with everything. Why don't they report all tuberculosis? Well, they did, actually. They do actually have statistics in that article about it. But it's directly linked to the ship. It's a person that was on the ship. There's a shitload of passengers that are all probably wondering if they're going to have this dormant strain, like the woman in Queensland who was only diagnosed a week ago with COVID-19, who was on the Ruby Princess 10 weeks later. But this article does talk about tuberculosis. It kills 1.5 million people worldwide. Well, that was a figure from 2018. And it is still one of the top 10 causes of death in the world. You seem to like to come into my lives all grumpy and whiny about stuff, and I'm happy to chat with you about it, but I just don't see your point. What's your real issue? What's motivating the anger that you seem to need to express every time you come onto a live of mine? Do you work for Carnival Cruises? Is that why you're so fired up about it? Please explain. Hey, Serenity B, how you doing? How's your weekend going? It just keeps growing. I think they're in a lot of poop, rightly so. Exactly, Angela. I mean, they're doing – this letter is purely – well, not purely, but this letter is clearly butt covering just in case. And the fact that a crew member on the Ruby Princess has been diagnosed with tuberculosis is kind of relevant in a podcast about the Ruby Princess. But again, it looks like Amir's gone. I've seen the numbers of viewers drop, and I suspect Amir might be one of them. But yeah, this is not the first time Amir has come in with all guns blazing. And I'm happy to stay live a little bit longer in case Amir does come back to respond. But I'm keen to know why this seems to cause you so much angst, Amir. Ruth, it's also increasingly more difficult to treat as it's resistant to known treatments. Yeah, it's kind of, I'm sort of interested to do a little bit more research on the whole. Oh, Biscuit's playing with her scratching post for the first time since coming home from the vet. That's good news. She's bouncing back. I was just going to go and see if there's anything else about the inquiry while we're still live. No, there's no new articles. Not since I've last reported on it anyway. But the next time I go live, I'd really like to chat about the Four Corners episode that showed in Australia last week, because it's certainly opened up a can of worms. There's a lot of questions. What about if someone got cancer? Would that also be news? What do you think, Amir? Doubtful. Amir is a mole for the cruise companies. With respect to Amir, cancer isn't contagious. Exactly. Like, how can you not see the connection to this? Well, he's got a good sense of humour about a misspelt name, at least. I like you for that, Amir. I'll give you that one. He does have a similar name to you. Careful with how you type the names, Angela. Not Angela, Ruth. But no, why? I mean, no, why would it be news? Can you not understand why this is? Can you not see that New South Wales Health are trying to be seen to do the right thing and sending out that letter, and what shit they would get in if they didn't? Can you imagine if the crew member with tuberculosis, the media got onto it and interviewed him, and New South Wales had known about it, did nothing about it, and interviewed him, how other passengers on the Ruby Princess would be feeling when a heap of them have lost family members? A lot of them know people that have caught COVID-19 from the Ruby Princess, and a lot of them are now wondering if it's possible they also could have a dormant strain after a woman was only diagnosed this week of catching it from the ship, and she's only just tested positive 10 weeks later. Missed the question. Now I don't know what the question was. Oh, the question was, how can you not see that this tuberculosis story is relevant? I mean, the Carnival Cruises are getting their asses sued off right now. Can you not see that not being public and not going out and letting everyone know about this crew member testing to tuberculosis, can you not see why that could potentially be another massive lawsuit for them if someone did end up contracting it as well and they hadn't said anything about it? Yeah, exactly, Ruth. Blame stupid autocorrect and not your rubbish dyslexia. Exactly. Be careful, Amir. You don't know what's going on. I'm not diagnosed dyslexic, but I have my dyslexic moments too. But yeah, it's totally relevant. And if you can give me a reason why it's not. but I would say a hypersensitive New South Wales Health Department, New South Wales state government, they probably would be very fucking stupid to not put something out and send letters out to all the passengers. If you can tell me why they shouldn't have done that, or why you don't think this has any bearing on the podcast about the Ruby Princess when it's a story about a crew member on the Ruby Princess, then let me know. I wouldn't want to recover from COVID and worry about, yeah, well, there'd be that too. There would be that too. New South Wales is not a news organisation. I have no issue with New South Wales. I have an issue in reporting some fact which on its own would be ordinary, but because it's Ruby Princess, it's somehow news. I still don't see your point. There's a special commission of inquiry into the Ruby Princess right now. There's a police investigation into the Ruby Princess right now. Why do you not think that this story is relevant? I am straw manning you. What the fuck does that expression mean? Never heard that one. Straw manning, a form of argument and an informal fallacy based on giving the impression of refuting an opponent's argument while actually refuting an argument which was not presented by that opponent. One who engages in this fallacy is said to be attacking a straw man. Right, well, present your argument again, Amir, then, if I'm missing the point, because... And I didn't say that you said that. I explained why I think this latest story is relevant to A, my podcast, and B, why it's been considered newsworthy. Because I think there's a hypersensitive situation going on here involving all of the parties involved. And if they hadn't released that information, then they could have found themselves in even deeper shit. I mean, that's the most simplistic way I can put it. And also, hi, Cherie. This inquiry is to do with Ruby and COVID, not Ruby. Huh? Totally lost me there too, Amir. I think you're strawmanning me. Not just Ruby. The inquiries, well, no, the inquiry and the criminal investigation are both to find out, well, the criminal investigation is pretty clear. They're finding out if there was any criminal negligence on behalf of whoever, of all the people who caught COVID-19 by being on the ship, and working out if there's criminal negligence, and if there is, who was responsible for it. The inquiry takes that step even further, where it's looking at every single person in the chain of this whopping great bloody schmozzle. I don't think you can separate the two. And I still don't understand your reason for jumping onto any live that I've done, or not any, but recently, with such anger. Like, I'm open for a chat, mate, but I'm not running the inquiry. I'm not defending anyone. I'm just reporting shit as it happens, and this is the latest thing to talk about. Contacting passengers about TB on board the Princess makes it 100% relevant, I would think. I agree. I think the fact that it's even a crew member from the Ruby Princess makes it relevant. And I don't know why I'm copying the no anger. Okay, cool. That's good to know. I just don't see why you think that this is not of any relevance to a podcast about the Ruby Princess. Say, for example, a story was in the news about a passenger, a crew member who got off the ship in Manila and broke quarantine and gave COVID-19 to some people in Manila. I would be covering that too. I will probably do a story when the Ruby Princess goes on its next cruise on the 4th of July. I feel so sorry for the people who saved up to go on a cruise and end up with these issues. It's shocking. It is. And initially what was shocking too was they were offered 50% of what they paid for the cruise or a credit for another cruise down the track, like as if you'd want to take the second option there. And a lot of people were very quick to demand full refunds. And I think in the end, Carnival caved and agreed to do that. But as recently as the last episode I did or the one before, like in the last week, there are passengers that still haven't seen a cent of it. So, yeah. It's totally relevant. It affects the passengers. I agree. TB is a notifiable disease. Yeah, well, I mean, it would be. And I guess, say it wasn't the Ruby Princess. I mean, say there was a cruise ship that didn't have COVID-19, wasn't a subject of a criminal investigation, wasn't the subject of a special commission of inquiry, and somebody was diagnosed on that ship with TB, it would be notified and reported, but it probably wouldn't make the media. I mean, maybe, I don't know, Amir, are we actually on the same page here? Love your chats. I did also listen to all of the 40 hours of hearings from the Ruby inquiry. Yeah, I haven't listened to all 40 of them. I think I've still got about 8 to listen to. But have you seen, just on another note, Amir, have you seen the Four Corners episode on YouTube that was aired in Australia this week about the Ruby Princess? Because I'm happy to put the link into chat if you haven't. It's kind of interesting. And not just the episode, but the comments in the YouTube comments under the viewer comments under the video. It was interesting that the Commissioner had most issue with the fact that New South Wales was responsible for borders, something that federal government should be responsible for. Yeah, the whole border force thing is really interesting because the other thing is border force were like, it's not we don't have that authority, we don't have that power, and pretty much every other party in this inquiry was like, yeah, you do. Yeah, yep, you do. But yeah, I'll put the link to the Four Corners one because I really do want to do a live on this bit later in the week. I usually do my updates on this on Wednesday nights. So I'll go live on Wednesday, but I'd even love, people if they felt comfortable to, you don't have to cam up. I'm fine with that as long as you can. All right, take care, Amir, and go look after your dad. And there's the link to the Four Corners episode. But yeah, more than happy for anyone. Thanks for joining too, Amir. You certainly, don't get me wrong, I really love people that challenge thoughts and get discussions going and all the rest of it. I'm totally down with that. I think the problem with plain text is it is sometimes hard to ascertain whether there's anger or not. But I do still think that there's a direct connection. And I do understand why you think it's sensationalistic as well. But I don't think a story about a crew member having TB is overly sensationalistic. Like if it was a story about an orgy that happened on the Ruby Princess last year, that would be sensationalist to me. Whereas this, I think, is kind of relevant because it's a letter that's gone out to all of these people that are already shitting themselves that they may still have they may still test positive for COVID-19 if they have a dormant version like the lady in Queensland has. Or there may be people that caught COVID-19 that are now recovering that are suddenly like, oh, fuck, TB, I could have been exposed to that as well. So, yeah, I guess that's probably the point you were making, but I do think it's relevant. I don't think it's sensationalistic. And I do get the comparison Amir was making regarding cancer as well. But I don't think this is dirty journalism, which is why I'm reading the article from the ABC News website, not from Take 5 magazine. You know what I mean? But, yeah, guys, check out that link on the YouTubes. You can save the Four Corners episode and watch it at your leisure. And then on Wednesday, I'll go live Wednesday night. I'll set the live up now when I finish this, and we can have a bit of a chat about some of the issues that come up in it. But the one that I really want to talk about is not why they were let off the ship on March the 19th, but why they were allowed to get on it on March the 8th. So, yeah, I'd love people to jump up on panel. I'm always happy for people to participate in chat as well. But if anyone would like to join me on Wednesday, please do. And other than that, unless anyone's got any news, anything they want to share, I'll just see what's happening over on Facebook. Hey, Liam, how you doing, mate? Oh, and hi to Biscuit too. I'll pass on your regards, Liam. She's sound asleep on her brown paper. She's made a little nest out of brown paper. She loves brown paper. And my sister gave us some flowers yesterday to wish Biscuit a speedy recover, and it was wrapped in more brown paper. So her already slightly tatty brown paper nest that she's made, she's now got a whole big new piece, and she's pretty happy. And I've managed to overcome my need for cleanliness, or not cleanliness, but little bits of shredded paper all over the floor. Not really my comfort zone, but it's her nest, and I'm used to living with it now. But she shreds paper like there's no tomorrow, but this new piece of paper 24 hours later is still perfectly intact, and she's lying on that right now. It's very cute. I don't know why too. It's on a really comfy rug. I think she just likes something about sleeping on brown. Should have been a good homeless cat. Bless her. I wasn't a joke at homeless expense, by the way. Please don't anyone be PC and get offended by that comment. All quiet in chat by the look of it. So, yeah, I may wrap this little show up. Thanks, Caroline, on Facebook. Thank you so much. She's getting there. I think she's going to be medicated probably for the rest of her life, but what we're hoping is that she's got two conditions, both not great ones, but the vet's hoping that one of them is causing the other one, as opposed to them being two standalone conditions that are just, running sort of parallel and independently sort of occurring. So by virtue of that, she's got an overactive thyroid. She's got a hypothyroidism, and the vet said that the heart disease and heart problem that she's got as well can often be caused by the hypothyroidism. But she's hoping that that's the case, as opposed to she's just got hypothyroidism and she's got heart disease or cardiomyopathy. So, yeah, poor little scrap. Isn't Biscuit... I forgot you're a wrench in here, Cherie, my mod. Isn't Biscuit lucky you chose her? I think she chose me by ignoring me. Angela, people are still protesting and rioting. Just awful. Their message is lost. Are you talking about the George Floyd ones? Yeah, the riots are getting out of hand, and is there something like 25 US cities are under curfew and the National Guard have been called in. I mean, I'm hoping, well, I'm not hoping. The death of George Floyd still just makes me tear up. And just hearing him calling out for his mum has to have been one of the most heartbreaking things I ever heard in my life. And that horrible cop just, just so disturbing. And I hope they do charge the other cops too, because there's footage showing that they were all pinning him down as well. There's footage from another angle. But they were so slow to charge this guy. And, yeah. And I fully understand why people are protesting. It's scary how violent the protesting is getting, but this isn't, a one-off event. At some point, this anger is going to spill over, and we're seeing it spill over, and I'm not defending it, but I can fully understand how frustrating it must be when this sort of shit is happening over and over and over and over, and no one's listening. Yeah, it's sad. And their message is lost. And, there are peaceful protests happening as well. But, yeah, I sense from a community I've got on Facebook of there's 2 groups with nearly 15,000 total for both groups. But in the bigger group, the one that's got 10,000 members, which is 50% American, there's been a lot of discussion about George Floyd over the last few days. And, there are so many members commenting on that thread, and they're just referring to America as just being broken and beyond repair. And when it gets to that sort of mindset, despite, everything that's happened previously and all the other events that have been discussed and witnessed, I kind of understand why it's got to the point that people are just so broken and so angry. It's incredibly sad. I feel for them so much. I feel for Americans so much. And I'm, as much as I'd love to say, come here, I'll adopt you, I'm very aware that I live in a country that ain't perfect either. But at the end of the day, I think the fact that the world is just watching on with extreme sadness and concern is a lovely thing, just like it was in Australia in January with the horrific bushfires. How comforting was it that the world was watching on with horror and concern. And now COVID-19, the global community was already narrowing and becoming closer. But events like these, it's the whole world's watching and the whole world's caring. And to me, it's one of the good things coming out of COVID-19 is the entire planet is experiencing something at the same time. So empathy is, overflowing in the bucket loads now. Ruth, your thyroid shits up your system regularly. Hope Biscuit recovers well with treatment. Thank you, Ruth. She's certainly on the mend. She looked so wonky yesterday. I mean, she was off her face when I brought her home on Friday. After her anaesthetic, she was wandering around the house like a drunk, and she slept in the hallway. She was not remotely interested in me. She looked at me with such disdain that I had taken her to the VET. I haven't told her yet. We've got to go back in 3 weeks for more bloods. And they'll probably have to knock her out again to do that because she's not a good patient. But then yesterday she was still pretty pissed off with me in the morning, but by about lunchtime she was starting to come out of her little shell and starting to be a little bit bouncy again and not so pissed off with me. But she was still quite wobbly. And then this morning she came in, I was sort of stirring at 4 a.m. and she came in and got up on the bed and she sort of pushes herself into me and like spoons me. It's very cute, as long as she's not under the doona and there aren't any pillows in the way. So, yeah, she's getting back. 25, as it wouldn't surprise me, the bit calling for his mum. Oh, I know. It was just absolutely heartbreaking. And for that cop to hear that and the other cops, for them just to all stand there and allow it to happen, it's just despicable. And I commented in my Facebook community that this could have happened anywhere on the planet, because there's people are vile all over the world, and as long as there's racists, it's not America's fault that that happened. It's the fault of the 4 fucking cops. I hear you, Cherie. I would have filed for divorce too. But apparently, and I don't know, this is unconfirmed, so don't take it as gospel, but there was discussion in my group, which isn't a true crime group or anything like that, but obviously it's such a topical issue, that this particular cop has been involved in other murders before, like police brutality type murders before. So if he'd even been reprimanded, the fact that I don't want to victim bash his wife, but if he had been reprimanded in the past for dodgy behaviour, it's a miracle she stuck around with him for as long as she did. Can just bring up a news story. Let's do that before we sign off. I can't remember what article I was reading. Oh, here's one that I haven't read though. This is the BBC.com. What happened in the? Oh no, I don't know. It's what happened in the final moments, but I was hoping the key events that led to his death. So there was the report of the fake $20 bill. He bought a packet of ciggies from Cup Foods, a grocery store, and believing the $20 bill he'd used was counterfeit, a store employee reported it to police. He had been working as a bouncer, but like millions of other Americans was left jobless by coronavirus. He was a regular at Cup Foods, a friendly face, a pleasant customer who never caused any trouble. The employee was just following protocol. In a call to 911 made at 10:01, the employee told the operator he had demanded the cigarettes back, but Floyd doesn't want to do that. The man appeared drunk and not in control of himself. The cops arrived 7 minutes later. He was put in a cop car with 2 other people around the corner. Then a cop pulled a gun on him, ordering Floyd to show his hands. Prosecutors could not explain why Mr. Lane thought it necessary to draw his gun. He then put his hands on Mr. Floyd and pulled him out of the car, and Floyd actively resisted being handcuffed. Can't say I blame him. Just had a gun put on you. Once he was handcuffed, he became compliant and was told he was being arrested for passing counterfeit currency. And then when they tried to put him in the car, the struggle ensued. Floyd stiffened up, fell to the ground, told the officers he was claustrophobic. Mr. Chauvin, he's the nasty one, and other officers, he arrived at the scene. He and the other officers tried to put Floyd into the car. During this attempt, Chauvin pulled Floyd out of the passenger side, causing him to fall to the ground. He lay there face down, still in handcuffs. So they did eventually get him in the car, and it was Derek Chauvin who then pulled him out of the car. Anyway, I won't go down further because I don't want to revisit the rest of it. It's just horrible. But what was I going to look at the riots? I don't want to play a video. At least 25 cities have enforced curfews amid violence and looting. Just uploaded 15 minutes ago, there's an article that protesters returned to the streets of New York City after the mayor pleaded for calm. And that was the one, I mean, there's so many riots going on, but if you saw the one in New York, there was a lot of footage of people covered in blood, and a lot of cars were set fire, and it was through Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. But an NYPD car ran into protesters in the streets in Brooklyn. And many of the demonstrations were peaceful, but as the afternoon drew on, problems mounted. 2 police cruisers ploughed into a crowd of people who'd been pelting them with various objects, knocking several to the ground. And then the protesters smashed the window of police vehicles, sprayed them with paint, set another police vehicle on fire. It was a small number of protesters who turned to violence. We hear, this is the mayor speaking, Bill de Blasio. We hear your desire to see these issues, relationship between police and community, the need for justice, the need for real change in our society. We hear you loud and clear. We appreciate respect to all peaceful protest, but now it is time for people to go home. But, you know, I get their frustration. Like, I get their frustration because the police have been committing acts of incredible violence and brutality, and like it was acknowledged, you know, the majority of the people are still being peaceful, but they've been pushed. I mean, I remember Justine Dornan, is it Dornan? Oh, God, now I feel bad that I've said her name wrong. Demond, sorry, I knew it wasn't right when I said Dornan. I mean, fortunately, in that one, the police officer who fatally shot her, he was charged with exactly the same charges as the latest case involving George Floyd's murder. Sorry, I'm reading 3 pages at once at the moment, but he was convicted of 3rd-degree murder and manslaughter, and he was acquitted of intentional 2nd-degree murder. And I did do a live on it ages ago about all the differences, but he ended up getting 12 and a half years in prison. But it took forever for them to charge him as well, you know, and there was a lot of tension brewing, waiting for that. I did, Cherie, yes, I did. I'm going to move on. I didn't plan to go live for an hour. I'm actually going to end this really quickly because I want to keep studying, just so I'm not studying late into the night. Biscuit and I have got a TV date. She likes watching TV with me at night. Cheery stuff. The preliminary autopsy wasn't good. Nothing he could have done merited that arsehole sitting on his neck for that long. Even when he was passed out, he stood. I know, it was hideous for nearly 3 minutes after he went unconscious. It just was so horrible. And his poor sister, who was so composed in the interview that she gave, and it's a creepy thing to watch, and I couldn't understand why people were filming it and not trying to pull the cop off. And then in the video, they say the cops have got mace. So now I understood that, but it was kind of creepy watching at the start because I was just like, somebody help this man. And then you see all the other cops coming into the interview as well, and it's like, are you kidding me? Like, it's just absolutely horrifying, horrific. And, you know, there's a lot of talk about how with social media and everything, you know, this sort of stuff is becoming more and more known and understood the world over. And as graphic and awful as the footage is, I don't think it's a bad thing that this sort of footage is getting out, whether people need to choose whether they want to watch it or not. But I don't think that there's been an increase. I don't think that there's been fewer incidences prior to his death. I just think more and more of them are starting to be captured. because you even, to take it off, I really want to move off for this subject because it's affecting me a bit too much, and I need to get back in my happy zone. I've got things to do because I could talk about this for days, and I also don't feel particularly prepared or qualified to talk about it in detail right now. But just jumping away from that, the tsunami, the Boxing Day tsunami, one of the reasons it generated so many people donating and so much assistance from other countries was because so many places managed to get footage of it. But, you know, you still think of countries like Africa where there's so many horrific things happening there every day, and because tourists aren't wandering around and uploading film, people don't really give as much of a shit. So I'm all for the more stuff that can be put out there, the better. Let's end on something cheery, guys. I need to get my head back into a happy place. There's a lot of YouTube true crime channels that are following the murder of George Floyd very closely. If people want to check it out, it's I'm not in a place right now that I can take it on board, except to say that I am following it. I think it's going to be it is clearly already a defining event in 2020. What a year. And even now we've got a bit of tuberculosis connected to the Ruby Princess as well. It's been one hell of a year. You know, started out with the bushfires and it's just been quite out there. But one thing I do want to end on, hey, I have a problem. How you doing? Watching up from Whoop Whoop. How are things in Whoop Whoop? Just before I wrap up, what was I going to say? Oh, I'm seeing a lot of people putting on Facebook they can't wait for things to go back to normal. This world has changed, and what the life we knew before COVID-19 is never going to return, I don't think. And I don't want it to. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm happy. I'm looking forward to seeing friends and family and all of that sort of stuff again, but I don't want the world to get back to that crazy pace. It was spinning out of control and everyone was just getting caught up and lost along the way, and people didn't have time for their family. They were on their phones all the time, all that sort of stuff. If this has brought about people returning back to the simple things in life and appreciating them much more, looking at other jobs where they may get to work from home a lot more, work in the community a lot more, people that are realizing, you know, they want to downsize, get rid of all the clutter and crap they've got in the all of that sort of stuff. I don't want the world to go back to the way it was before. I think I've always thought as soon as this story broke that this is going to lead to a much better world, and I feel weird saying that when we've also been talking about George Floyd in the same sentence. But, you know, the actions of a few people doesn't make the entire world fucked. And when people go, what's the world coming to? Like someone was commenting about that on one of the George Floyd lives the other night, and I was thinking, but it's not the world. It's some really shitty people that happen to be living on the planet we're living on right now. And don't get me wrong, and now we're talking about George Floyd's murder again, because I'm not ignorant. I do know that countries that are invaded become a perfect storm for racism and everything else, and Australia is just as guilty of that as the US. I realise there's intense racial undertones involved in what's going on here as well, but I'm not despairing that the whole world is fucked because there happens to be some really shitty people living on it, is my point. But I don't want to oversimplify things, so it's a bit wet. I will send some rain down this way. I'd like my tank to be topped up. Or at least send a bucket down the Midlands Highway, Darls. Alrighty, thank you to everyone over on Facebook for joining in. Just repeating, we now have a crew member from the Ruby Princess who has been diagnosed with tuberculosis, and the crew and hospital staff and people who work closely with him are being tested, and all the passengers were sent a letter from New South Wales Health to let them know and to not be overly concerned. But it's just another quirky little chapter in the ongoing saga of the wreck of the Ruby Princess. Thank you, Angela. Happy thoughts and positive vibes to everyone. And thank you for checking in and listening. And I'm sure, well, I'll definitely be going live Wednesday night. I'll set up the live for that where we can have a chat about the Four Corners episode and some of the things that have come out of that. And until then, stay groovy. And I could possibly be going live on my other channel from the beach, maybe even tomorrow morning. But I love you guys. Take care. Stay groovy. And hit the thumbs up on your way out, guys. And if you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button as well. See you all soon. Bye for now. I can't end all of that. That sounded bad. Bye for now.